Welcome to the second segment of our News Media Literacy Information Program. In this video, I'm very excited and delighted to be able to speak with Matthew Hanna, the Assistant Professor of Digital Humanities at the Purdue University Libraries and School of Information Studies. Professor Hanna is an expert on conspiracy theories and QAnon and has analyzed some of the ways this group is spreading its message online. In one of his recent articles titled QAnon and the Information Age, he argues that the growth and spread of what he calls bizarre, vast, and complex conspiracies is causing us to enter what he calls a dark age for information literacy. So welcome, Professor Hanna, and let me ask you, what do you mean by a dark age for information literacy?
Well, Dr. Berkman, it's great to be with you, and thank you for the invitation to talk with you today. I see the dark age of information literacy not as an actual dark age, as we might have imagined from the sort of medieval history, but rather as a sort of theoretical way to understand this new bizarre phenomena where humans have access to more information and data than ever before. And in fact, are probably more literate than ever before in history. And yet we see the rise of bizarre conspiracy theories that are arising around us all the time, and that actually have begun to impact the way our very democracy functions. And so what I'm trying to understand is, why is this strange disjuncture happening? Why are we both more literate than ever before and also seemingly more susceptible to misinformation and disinformation? And so I argue in a book project I'm working on that this information dark age is predicated on three legs of the three-legged stool, essentially. One is that information infrastructure, the recommendation algorithms that will push similar content, have made it very easy for a researcher, say, using YouTube, to watch a video about QAnon and then get more and more recommendations based on that viewing. So that's one leg of this, the infrastructure that makes it possible. Part of this infrastructure is also the fact that we can post anonymously. So a lot of the QAnon information hubs were on the dark web, where people can post things without having any identifying information available. And as we saw with the 2016 presidential elections, this really opened up a space for the intelligence operators in foreign countries to impact our elections. So that's one leg of this information dark age. The second leg is the fact that we have generated a lot of ideas around politics that have increasingly become partisan, so that we're now going through a period that Richard Hofstadter called a paranoia, the paranoid age of politics, in which we're increasingly partisan, and we no longer believe that the other side of the political divide are even human. And so that increasing partisanship has fueled a sort of environment in which hostility and a predilection towards certain information has become paramount. And so these are two legs of the information dark age. And then the third leg of this is a sort of ability to engage with one another without any identifying information. So I call this the identity politics of the internet. That is to say that when we can be anonymous, we perform an identity that's very unique to that anonymity. And you'll see a lot of this in QAnon circles, in which individuals use fake names, avatars, sort of alternative identities, which enable them to share information without repercussions and to engage one another in this kind of hostile political environment.
So it's a confluence of powerful forces together, which are kind of creating this environment that we find ourselves in, which is fascinating and a little bit scary. Let me ask you, there's a lot of discussion these days about misinformation and disinformation. Often it relates to political misinformation. It can be commercial. I'm wondering, conspiracy content like QAnon, does that kind of content have the same kind of characteristics as, let's say, that more garden variety form of misinformation, disinformation, or is it distinctive in some way?
I believe it's distinctive. Of course, conspiracy theories have always been with us. I always like to joke that conspiracy theories are as American as apple pie. We've always enjoyed conspiracy theories, whether that's conspiracies about the Kennedy assassination or the moon landing, and they've been with us throughout history. But I think what's unique about QAnon is that it is entirely born online and that it's crowdsourced, so that with very few actual posts, this Q individual, who we actually don't know who it is, it's completely anonymous, was able to generate so much energy and engagement from thousands and thousands of people around the world who didn't know each other, and yet who still submitted to this, submitted hours and hours of research materials to the theory, and really built it in this crowdsourced way. So I think that for me, QAnon is a really unique and very modern phenomenon, which makes it very interesting as a researcher, but also terrifying as someone who actually cares about the health of our information ecosystems. And the other component of this that's very unique is that QAnon actually built in mechanisms. And you can see these if you read a lot of the old forums on, say, 8chan or 4chan, built-in mechanisms to recruit new followers. This is a process called red pilling, which is derived from the 1999 film The Matrix. And the idea behind the red pill is that when you take the red pill, you become awake to all of the mysterious, shadowy forces that operate in the world around you. So for QAnon, the red pill was a way to encourage family and friends to do their own research about things like the deep state, which is a QAnon conspiracy theory, or to do their research about the satanic globalist pedophiles that are running our government. And so QAnon is very unique in that it includes an ethos of research and doing your research and finding information about these topics, but it also has a recruitment mechanism to invite newcomers to join the conspiracy by doing that research. And so I think for me, the linkage of these two things is incredibly interesting, but it's also very frightening. And the other component of this is that we've now seen that QAnon's become linked to all sorts of new and interesting conspiracy theories and misinformation and disinformation events. So for example, a lot of the COVID-19 conspiracy theories came out of QAnon. So things like the 5G conspiracy, that 5G was causing the coronavirus, or that the Gates Foundation were involved in some way in population control and things like that, and some of these sort of bizarre theories about COVID. So in a lot of ways, as I say in one of my articles, QAnon has become a public health crisis because of the way these conspiracies actually impact things like public vaccination, mask mandates, and things like that. So
yeah, so I mean, that kind of brings me to, what can we do about a question? In a sense of, I know there's top-down solutions, there's a lot of solutions. What I'm doing really in this series is a little bit talking about what can the ground up do, the someone who becomes media and information literate, who understands how our media system works. So what I'm wondering is, does this information, this false, even dangerous, hazardous information posted by QAnon or related conspiracy theories, have you found that the information telegraphs itself in any way? And I know you've written a little bit about, for example, false but superficially convincing visualizations. Are there telltale caution signs that a user could look for that should just make one a little more skeptical, have their antenna go up of the validity of what one is seeing?
yeah, there are some sort of recurring features that you will see in any of these conspiracy theories, whether it's QAnon or the COVID conspiracies or some of the newer permutations of this. So one of these is that the adherents imagine themselves engaged in some kind of global conflict of good versus evil. And the good might be the patriots, they're often called patriots, or the people that are sort of part of the conspiracy theory, the group. And the evil is usually the deep state, the Democratic Party, some kind of globalist cabal. So anytime you see these sort of rhetoric of good and evil, it's usually a hallmark that there's something amiss. Adherents will often openly fantasize about being digital soldiers engaged in some kind of information war. And QAnon relied on the rhetoric of information war almost to an absurd amount, even assigning certain tactical roles to Anons in order to perform various operations. As we've seen with the rise of the dark MAGA movement, these fantasies about information war have actually turned into fantasies about actual war or insurrection or civil war. And so any of this rhetoric of being a soldier in the fight against the evil forces, they often will rely on anonymous platforms using pseudonymized or anonymized accounts. So if you are engaging with individuals who are using these anonymous accounts or relying on 8chan or 8kun for sharing information, that's interesting sign that maybe something is afoot there. And they espouse conspiracies about vague, shadowy forces such as the deep state. So the enemies are sort of vaguely defined. And when you ask questions about who the deep state is, they kind of point to other shadowy figures without really any clear definitions. And so for me, I think that's a really interesting aspect of this. Of course, there's a lot to criticize about the way things are going in the country, but often the focus will be on some kind of vague evildoer rather than some material conditions related to the situation. And I think one of the biggest challenges is learning how to separate, say, fake news or that kind of misinformation or disinformation from, say, biased news. And that's one of the frequent things you'll see, these slippages that CNN might be fake news rather than legitimate news with a maybe liberal bias. And so thinking about those kinds of dynamics, the use of maps and visualizations should always raise skepticism, especially when the visualizations seem disconnected from any actual data. And anyone that's using maps or charts that doesn't connect you to their data, you should definitely be thinking about those things. And so I think those are some of the features to look out for with these conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I was particularly interested how in one of your articles, and there's a word for this that you'll probably remember how to pronounce it better than I do, but it's a phenomena where one automatically assigns meaning to a lot of discrete, unconnected events and in individuals where there really is no connection, but they're just different events. What is that called, and how does that work online?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite words. So the word is apophenia, and it's the tendency to connect things that are disconnected or disparate. And one of the things I'm trying to articulate in my research is the way that the internet actually facilitates apophenia. Because we have access to all of this information, and because the structure of the internet is hyperlinked in such a way, it's very easy to find connections between events that may or may not be legitimate. And so if you read a lot of the QAnon research boards, the old research boards, you'll find that in fact, what you're seeing a lot of is apophenia. Folks will see a Q drop that mentions something like the hunt for Red October. And that cryptic clue will lead them down a research path in which they identify all of these geohistorical events and connect them together into this vast conspiracy. And it's really, really amazing to watch it happen live on an internet image board. But that's really the dynamic by which we're working with now. And for me, what's really troubling is how do you disrupt that process when the folks that you're talking to actually think they're more information literate than you are, because they've done this research?
Well, it's very interesting. That mantra, do your own research, of course, is something that journalists and librarians have been advising students as a form of fact checking and becoming more knowledgeable about a topic. So, what does this say about our information world and those who teach media literacy? It's a little bit of a dilemma in some ways, the way that these groups are using the phrase, do your own research, as a way to say, well, we've done our fact checking.
Yes, and one of the more interesting components of this is that we're finding that our information literacy frameworks may not be sufficient for disrupting this information cycle. So for example, the ACRL had a framework for information literacy for higher education. This was a way to teach information literacy at the college level. And it included 6 frames, 6 principles that were considered valuable. And what's interesting to me is that all 6 of these principles are also valued in the QAnon community. So things like authority is constructed. They believe authority is constructed as well. That's why they are opposed to the mainstream media. Maybe thinking about Chomsky's notion of manufactured consent. Information creation as a process is also valued in the QAnon community. So the notion that these information literacy frameworks can help us disrupt conspiracy theories may be a little short-sighted, and we might need to enhance or address some of the gaps as we're considering the particular dynamics of the internet.
Yep. And I just have a couple of more questions. So I'm wondering about somebody who goes online, starts reading, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, or maybe aware a little bit or less aware about their maybe getting some conspiracy type of information. I'm wondering if you have any advice for somebody about how to avoid getting sucked in yourself. Are there, for example, any internal emotional or other states one should be monitoring oneself that one's experiencing to avoid going down that rabbit hole oneself?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that I think we're going to need to do some serious research on in the coming years. One of the challenging aspects of that is that a lot of the QAnon community that have sort of found a way out of the cult of QAnon describe the way in which they actually were very resistant to family and friends saying to them, like, you know, this is not healthy, or this is crazy, like you should really think about these problems. And so what we've seen is that there is a desperation right now in American life that there's something wrong, and we're not quite sure what it is. And a lot of folks feel like that that feeling of anger and frustration is channeled now into a community where they may be feeling valued and where their contributions are valued. And so I think figuring out a way to channel that anger and frustration into actual practicable steps that are healthier is one aspect of this, and staying off the internet, staying off these discussion boards, and really encouraging people to avoid some of this content. But I think in a country in which mental health is not widely available, in which many areas of the country don't have access to mental health, it's going to be a real challenge to deal with these conspiracies. And as I say in every article, future QAnons will arise. It's just a matter of time. I think we can see from the January 6th insurrection that something is really wrong with the way that our country is going in terms of mental health and in terms of information and our access to information. So, you know, I don't have a good answer for that, but I'm hoping that in the next few years, we'll find some answers and we'll find some ways to intervene with folks. I think one thing is to do it with empathy and with recognition that these are not stupid, ignorant people. These are normal, intelligent Americans who are looking for answers. And it's just that they're finding them in the wrong places.
Right. Finally, Professor Hanna, are you noticing anything new, new ways that QAnon and conspiracy groups are finding to spread false information that's not yet quite been recognized that we need to be aware of? Often we seem to be in a little bit of a catch-up mode, methods that almost like in a kind of an arms race. Those who want to spread misinformation, they use certain techniques, they get discovered, the media and others maybe say, they'll say, what's going on? Watch out for this. Anything on the horizon you see that we need to be attuned to?
Well, one of the big events that happened was when Twitter and Facebook and Instagram did a big purge of QAnon accounts, and they literally got rid of hundreds of thousands of bots and accounts, and they even got rid of the former president of the United States for spreading misinformation. And so the social media, mainstream social media, seems to be trying to address this question about misinformation and disinformation. The problem with this process, which is called deplatforming, is that when you deplatform someone, not only do you risk valorizing their message, but you also push them into other areas. And so now what we've seen is that there's a lot of QAnon content on Telegram, which is still dedicated to an open forum without any restriction on speech. And we're seeing a lot of QAnon content on Truth Social, which is the Trump-founded alternative to Twitter. And Truth Social is really interesting because they use the word truth quite liberally, right? So instead of retweeting, you retruth. And I think that what we're going to see is that as we try to combat misinformation and disinformation on mainstream social media, more and more of these alternative sites are going to appear. And so the real question is, you know, can deplatforming really help us, or do we need something else? And I think we need some kind of nationwide discussion of information literacy in a way that's nonpartisan and really tries to address these dynamics by which people get sucked into conspiracy theories and these movements. And so some kind of movement for information literacy that's separated from universities and available to the widespread public. What that would look like, where the money would come from to fund it, I have no idea, but I think it would be really, really rich opportunity to have these discussions. One of the things I hope to do in the next few years is to seek grant funding to do a sort of pilot project of something like this in Indiana. So going around to local Indiana communities and having sort of town hall events with locals to talk about information literacy and how to avoid falling into these traps. But it's only one possible idea, and I'm not sure it would even help. And I think what we're going to see is more and more of these alternative sites. So it's definitely something to watch as we go along. I definitely have a Truth Social account. I'm following some of the discussions there as well.
And of course, it's possible that with Elon Musk and his making a lot of noise about his a believer in free speech and how that gets translated, kind of telegraphing that he doesn't like the concept of deplatforming and how that will play out and whether those kinds of people that have been deplatformed are then able to come back to the giant social network of Twitter is also something I guess we'll have to look and see what's going to happen.
Yeah, we're going to have a very interesting few years as we head into the midterm elections and then the 2024 presidential elections. And I think a lot of this is going to reappear with a bang. It's interesting that Donald Trump wrote a 12-page response to the January 6 hearings in which he stated, quote, "It's up to American patriots to arm themselves with the information," end quote. And you know, the language of patriots engaged in an information war comes straight out of QAnon. So it's going to be very, very difficult for us to intervene in these conversations when even the highest office of the land is spouting misinformation and disinformation.
Well, we all have our work cut out for us. It is a huge challenge. And thank you so much for sharing all of your insights, your research, really valuable. I enjoy getting to talk to you over this session here. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Berkman. It's good to talk with you.
All right. Bye-bye.